Well, if I were the body of Berlin, and if I were to represent the dance in Berlin, the first impression that I have is that of a transitory body, shifting through different circles, social circles, professional circles, also very different professional attitudes and ways of relating to dance making and dancing. So if I were to name the temperature, it would probably be shifting. But at this moment, lukewarm would be good as something that is enjoyable.
Do you have memories of actually not being enjoyable at all, being here in Berlin and working with dance?
Yeah, very much. There has been moments since my graduation from HCT in which I felt the need to renegotiate my relationship with the city and, of course, with the arts scene, not only contemporary performance art, but also state theaters, also opera houses, also clubbing. And there has been moments in which I felt included into a milieu, into a network of relationships. And there has been moments in which I felt that the journey was more solitary.
Because your own decision or because exclusion?
I'm not sure if I can distinguish the two. I do feel that I needed some moment of solitude in order to look at what's happening in the city, and also I grew fond of my transitory nature because it allows me to have a perspective that is a bit wider and, to my eyes, more objective. What I miss in one situation, I might find it in the other one, and then artistically there is a mutual inspiration that transpires.
When you compare Berlin with other cities that you have been working, also what do you think is specific from this city in terms of professional dance?
One of the things that fascinated me the most about Berlin is sheer curiosity for experimentation of any kind. There is an attitude around looking deeper into things, not necessarily producing something finished out of it, which on the long run can become also a necessity. But it has a vibe that opens new spaces and that allows fusion between threads, between realms of knowledge, and also between art forms, really. It seems that the underground of Berlin can move faster than whatever institution might capture. And this is feeding a lot my artistic journey. Of course, this type of undercurrents, they're not always formalized by their own definition, and they're also, resources is always an issue. So in my experience, I also tend to find working situation outside of Berlin and outside of Germany, which leads to a very nomadic lifestyle. However, I do feel that when I exit Berlin to visit whatever other country, I bring a certain collective identity, which is forward thinking and forward moving in many ways. and I treasure that because
Do you mean the collective identity of being based in Berlin?
Of being part of these Berlin circles. I extrapolate some somatic knowledge and also conceptual attitude around dance making, video making, art making, and I bring it and I facilitate it in places that maybe don't have that. Through the years, I've come to terms and I have accepted the required nomadic lifestyle of contemporary artists. And it is no longer, at a personal level, a problem. I actually find it fun. This, of course, comes with implications, because as nomads do, you come to situations, you live there for a moment, you use the resources that you have, and then when it feels concluded, you go and you move to something else. You might return, but the cycles that you adopt are not, or that I adopt, are not calendar cycles. They're more linked to certain occasions that come to me, certain territories that I would like to explore. My constant wish for cultural exchange and confrontation, if you will. I've been recently traveling through Indonesia for work, and years before I was in the States, and all this is part of my way of making art. This does affect the formats of your work. It is easier to tour a video than to tour a piece. I mean, this we know. But also, nomadic lifestyle comes with restrictions, especially when it comes down to material transportation. So this is one, I would say, area of reflection. How to engage politically. I mean, I tend to tend to surrender to my nomadic flow, and wherever I am, I attempt to bring a contribution through what I consider my own values, personal values, ethical values, and artistic values. And in terms of the Volksbühne occupation, I had a sheer need to go and experience that in first person rather than living through mediatic information. And my intervention has also been an artistic one. I wasn't necessarily aligned politically with the Occupying Collective, although I've been part of that event. But through those days, I have activated an artistic platform around the body, and I looked at that situation as a place of encounters. This can be a way of political engagement through the presence of the body. My agency is where I am, and if I'm nomadic, then also my agency will be nomadic. However, I do think that as situations are becoming more and more interconnected, then maybe also the political engagement is less geographical and can also have other forms. I also look at Berlin as a city that is polycentric and that has more levels happening at the same time, and these levels, some of them are interconnected and others are quite disconnected. So in terms of creating situations of agency where artists can bring their political contribution through their work and presence. I do treasure the power of events, and especially cultural events and festivals and gatherings, really, in which bodies are magnetized together and they exchange and they go. It would be beautiful to say, I am here and I commit to my city, Berlin. But it's also the city that doesn't allow me to do that, because, and also the more globalized European situation that doesn't allow me to do that, because I'm requested to be elsewhere, because of opportunities, because of resources, because of lack of resources, and also because transiting between institutions, theaters, free projects, project for the love of art, I again have to really come in touch with this nomadic lifestyle. It is not exactly a choice, but it does come in sync with a certain vocation. It makes sense.
I mean, it is not a choice.
No, I'm thinking again about the Volksbühne occupation. Despite all positions and opinions, if it was a good thing or bad thing, or legal or illegal, and so on, there's a part of me who thinks that the city has missed an opportunity, and it's not so much of an opportunity of political protest, but rather an experiment on how a initiative from the bottom, from the collective, can meet a leadership that is vertical and from the top within a cultural setting. I wish I could have attended this dialogue, and of course it's not a frictionless dialogue, because it is about power and decision making, and it comes with a lot of implications around funding and distribution of resources and who gets played and so on. But I found revealing that artists that I thought they would show up, they didn't. And I'm not talking only about established artists who might be affected in their image by their presence there. Also early and mid-career artists and choreographers. And without any judgment, I'm just opening a reflection about how the system is swirling our energy and presence and behaviors and attitudes in specific places, defining what's allowed and what's not, and what is actually seen as good for our advancement, and what is seen as bad in our professional career, really. And being desire and disobedience, the two polarities that are very present in my work right now, and have always been. It felt important to be there, and it felt important also to witness, almost as an outside eye, what was happening. I do wish that Berlin can generate a similar situation. I think it's one of the few cities that I know in which something like this can actually exist, and it would be a great model and experiment.
if you want to maintain certain things, no? I mean, a choice can always be a choice. The thing is that maybe you have something to lose or there is something to sacrifice as well. So I guess it's a matter of priority or what do you give more importance or more value to as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because a choice can always be a choice, you can always stay here.
Yes, you can. However, I am not sure if then you will be able to bring a contribution with a wide perspective. I could work in a state theater. However, my life would become that. My contribution will be there, not exactly to the city of Berlin. And so if I choose to be more transient into my presence, then this comes with consequences also. I mean, already the difficulty that early career artists have to, for example, find a part-time job in the city and then do the rehearsals and their work in the evenings or when they're free. This gives already an answer that it's not exactly a choice. I do agree with you that at a very deep or high level, one could say, I invest here. However, this brings me to the question that I've been dealing with for the past few weeks, which is, how do we grow something from this place? A place that is transitory, a place that is fluctuating, a place that is globalized, a place that is anglicized, a place that feels nothing but a place that doesn't feel like a stable ground. And I am in a moment in which I'm breathing with a longer breath in my artistic journey and in my career. However, I do wish to see something blossoming, and this is where I'm working and what I'm working for.
What moves you when operating in the professional field? Do you consider yourself an ambitious person?
When I think of ambition, there is immediately another word that comes to me, which is vocation. And I like very much the root of the word vocation, which is basically putting the voice into action. And ambition and vocations are complementary, but they don't belong to different sources. I would say that I'm an ambitious person in the sense that I am attempting to acquire the resources that I wish for my work in order to work well. And I do feel a certain gratification when my work is recognized and it gets exposed. I guess this is true for many artists. Vocation is another force. It has accompanied me with open questions around what I do and why I do it, what moves me and what moves others, and how can I meet those two desires for movement, my own and that of others. Vocation is also the force that asks me, requires me to redirect my own actions in order to create a certain continuity, which is not exactly dictated by what the system wants from me. I graduated with a piece with 30 performers. I was expected to make a solo or a duet or maybe a trio because that would be marketable. But that wasn't my vocation. So,
what happens when vocation and ambition is beautiful. We could actually make a play with embodying all of these driving forces.
Yeah.
What happens when vocation and ambition don't synchronize, or sometimes they are incompatible? How situations of pitiful compromises? Have you been in the situation of actually having to decide because the situation asks you that either you choose for vocation or you choose for ambition? Have you been in this moment of either having to do a compromise or to make a choice, to make a decision?
There are two conflicts that come to my mind. One is that ambition is also often linked with haste.
What is?
Haste when you want to achieve things fast. Comes with ambition. Ambition is about also perhaps about becoming successful in the next 2 years, not when you're 50. This is one thing. The other thing that I'm thinking about is when, for example, I find myself within projects, maybe structured projects, in which I'm asked to make a piece of work, but I'm not given the freedom of making whatever piece of work. I'm given, for example, a specific group of people, a specific location, a specific length of the work, a certain technical frame, and that's where I need to move. And maybe it's a good opportunity because it comes at a very good address, or it has a very nice exposure, or maybe it's with very nice colleagues. But maybe my vocation is elsewhere at that moment. Maybe I don't want to produce, or maybe I want to produce, but produce something different. So this job of having to channel the vocation into the situation that it's there, in order not to miss the opportunity which ambition wants to fulfill. It's an act of temperance. It's about talking about temperature. It's about mixing cold water with warm water and letting it flow. Obviously, I understand this possibility of living and working in different professional contexts as a one journey. I do treasure a lot the work in the opera, especially because it is rare that we get to work with 30 live musicians, that we get to work with a full functioning theatrical machinery, and we are also confronted with a certain expectation of what the audience wants or does not want, which to a certain extent it might seem as a limit in terms of progression of the artistic languages. On the other hand, it puts me in a place in which I have to create a certain bridge between what's happening on stage and what's happening in the seating. Sometimes I found myself skeptical of certain proposals in which this channel between stage and spectator wasn't as solid, maybe more obscure or foggy. When you work within structures, within visible structures, you fit a role, and you are confined to those tasks and to that position, and you play that role. It is very difficult, in my experience, within state theatre and opera houses, to switch roles. For example, choreographers are rarely considered directors, which for me is very strange. But this jump seems hard to do. However, I do not think that in the contemporary performance scene, in the free scene, structures are not a place. There might be a freer division of roles, and one person, one artist could cover multiple roles, but at the same time, there are always politics at stake within decision-making processes, within funding politics, and maybe they're just less geographically located into one house. So yeah, the codes of communication and of behaviors are different, but ultimately not so much. When I think of queer within my artistic practice, queer is not something that is related so much about a certain aesthetic, but it's more about the strategies that I apply in order to inquire specific codes of behaviors of the body, individual body or collective body, within its own setting. And this setting can be the stage, this setting can be the frame of the camera, and of course also the social circles in which these bodies operate. It is a very delicate question because I have the feeling that the notion of queer has been appropriated and also been encapsulated within a certain recognizable form, but that in itself is no longer queer, is it? For example, during my experience of Dance Web in Vienna this summer, I realized that I have not taken part in all the workshops that were considered queer or for queers or for queer artists, because I am not looking at the queer safe spaces and as a space that I need. My work and the work that I wish to do is in the normative space. And this normative space is to be identified. It's not something that is happening elsewhere out there where people have boring jobs and they dress in boring ways, and this is what we have to explore or change or entertain. It is really about looking at the ways in which we relate with each other. Also, and especially when we're tackling topics of inclusion, institutionalized racism, artistic visibility, and really digging into these matters and seeing where there are spaces that can be open, where can we crack also the nervous system of a situation in order for a new territory to appear. So that's where I see queer. I also see queer as in relation to spirituality, and how do you facilitate spirituality into the art world without having to categorize your work as esoteric or as spiritual or as you name it, but how can we look at art and art making in a more holistic way without having the fear of introducing certain topics. Queer is also something that happens on the surface of the body for me. It does come in the form of a soft provocation at times, but it's a constructive one. And I'd like it to be on the surface of my body because body is my medium. So if I'm able to process it there and offer it there, then this also draws back into my artistic process.